I started from scratch and built a fortune worth billions, but at the moment I was diagnosed with terminal cancer, I discovered that my husband of 20 years, Evren, had been keeping a mistress for 18 years and even had an illegitimate daughter. By my sickbed, I called in my lawyer and told him word by word, the first clause of the will, only the children of my biological son can inherit everything I own. The lawyer was stunned and hesitated to speak. But ma'am, your son isn't married yet, and he. Write it as I said, I interrupted him, leaving no room for negotiation in my tone. 3 months later, the illegitimate daughter stormed in with a DNA report, demanding her share of the inheritance. My lawyer simply smiled faintly, while Evren's face turned deathly pale in an instant. Chapter 1. The doctor set down the scan in his hand, looked up at me, and spoke in a calm yet undeniably heavy tone, "Delilah, it's cancer. Late stage." My mind buzzed as if something had instantly shattered, but soon, I forced myself to regain composure, looked up, and asked him, "How long do I have?" The doctor adjusted his glasses and chose his words carefully, "With conservative treatment, 3 months. More aggressively, perhaps up to 6 months." I nodded, said, "I understand," then stood up and walked out of the consultation room. Evren immediately stepped forward, reaching out to support my arm, his voice filled with anxiety. "Delilah, how are you?" I looked at him, this face I've seen for 20 years. From when he was just a young kid managing my warehouse to now, a vice president worth billions, I thought I understood every look, every gesture of his. But just half an hour ago, while waiting for the results in the examination room, I picked up his phone that he'd left behind out of boredom. The screen lit up automatically, showing a family photo, Evren holding a girl of about 16 or 17, with a still charming woman standing beside them. The 3 of them were smiling brightly, but the background was the suburban villa I had bought and gifted him 2 years ago. He said he liked the quiet and would stay there occasionally. So this was the kind of quiet he meant. It felt as if a cold hand had clenched my heart tightly, the pain making it almost impossible to breathe. 18 years, I built this empire from scratch, fighting tooth and nail for every inch of it, while he had already built another family outside. I suppressed the turmoil in my heart and shook my head. "It's nothing. I have a meeting at the company, so I'll head over first." Evren grabbed me firmly, his grip too strong for me to break free. "What meeting could be more important than your health? What did the doctor say? Tell me." His eyes were red, and his voice even carried a slight tremor. His performance was utterly convincing. I just felt a wave of nausea and pushed his hand away, my tone flat. "It's just a bit of low blood sugar, an old issue." He paused for a moment, seemingly taken aback by my coldness, then quickly caught up with me. "Then let me drive you back to the office." "No, you must go home and rest. Money can never be fully earned, but health is the foundation of everything." He pulled me toward the parking lot, chattering nonstop along the way. He recounted the hardships we faced when we first met, how we had struggled step by step to reach where we are today, and how much he cared for me. I stared at the receding street scenes outside the window, not taking in a single word. My mind was fixated on that photo. The girl's eyes and brows bore a striking resemblance to his, about 70% alike. She looked 16 or 17, and the timing matched perfectly. Back home, he eagerly poured me a glass of water and fetched my slippers. "Lie down for a while. I'll make you something to eat." I didn't move, sitting on the sofa, looking at this living room I had personally designed. Every piece of furniture was something I had carefully selected from abroad, but now it all seemed like a huge joke. The clatter of pots and pans came from the kitchen, full of the warmth of everyday life. He had always been like this. In front of me, he was always the considerate and attentive husband. Everyone outside envied me, saying how fortunate I was, successful in my career, a happy family, and a husband like Evren, who was a model spouse, never involved in scandals, and always treated me like a treasure. I smiled, but as I smiled, tears began to fall. I took out my phone and sent a message to my personal assistant, "Help me investigate someone, a woman, around 40 years old, with a 16 or 17-year-old girl, related to Evren." I want all the information, as quickly as possible. After sending it, I deleted the record. Evren came out holding a bowl of steaming hot noodles. Eat it while it's hot. I boiled 2 eggs. He sat beside me, looking at me with expectant eyes. I picked up my chopsticks, took a bite, and the taste was good, just a bit salty, probably because my tears had fallen into it. I smiled at him. It's delicious. His expression instantly relaxed, and he smiled too. As long as it's delicious, I'll cook for you every day from now on. I nodded, but inwardly I thought coldly, Evren, we have plenty of time ahead. No, I don't have much time left, so we need to hurry. That night, he slept soundly, but I lay awake all night, staring at the ceiling. Early the next morning, my assistant called, astonishingly efficient. I walked to the balcony to answer, and his calm voice came through, Delilah, I've found everything. The woman's name is Margot, 42 years old. She used to work as a clerk at your company and resigned 18 years ago. Shortly after leaving, she gave birth to a girl named Isara. Has a paternity test been done? I asked. It's done. We obtained Isara's hair sample and compared it with hair from Evren's frequently used comb. The biological father-daughter relationship probability is 99.99%. My knuckles turned white as I gripped the railing, and I asked again, have you checked the villa they live in and the money they use? Yes, we have. The villa was purchased outright by Evren 3 years ago using his personal account, registered under Margot's name. Every month, Evren transfers $500,000 in living expenses to Margot's card. Isara attends an international school, and all her tuition and extracurricular expenses are covered by Evren. Over the years, the total spending amounts to approximately $90 million. Each cold number felt like a sharp knife piercing my heart. $90 million, that's a quarter of my profits, money I earned with my life, yet he effortlessly used it to support another family, to raise a child he had with another woman. In that moment, my heart died completely. I understand, I said in a low voice. Organize all the materials, photos, videos, transfer records, everything, encrypt them, and send them to me. Also, help me schedule a meeting with lawyer Leander. Now, immediately. After hanging up the phone, I returned to the room. Evren was still asleep, a satisfied smile on his face, unaware of what good things he might be dreaming about. I watched him for a long time, then smiled. Evren, what you owe me, I will collect it all, principal and interest, one by one. Chapter 2. Leander arrived quickly. He is my personal lawyer and one of the few people I can trust. We met during the most difficult time in my career, when I was betrayed by a partner, entangled in lawsuits, and nearly bankrupt. It was he who helped me turn the situation around, step by step. I arranged to meet him at a cafe near the company, not wanting Evren to know a single thing about it. Leander, in his 50s with hair half-gray, still looked spirited. When he saw me, he paused for a moment. Delilah, why do you look so pale? I waved my hand, gesturing for him to sit down. Take a seat, Leander. As I spoke, I pushed a hospital diagnostic report toward him. He picked it up to read, his frown deepening with each line. Finally, he set the report down and let out a long sigh. How could this happen? It's all right, medicine is advanced these days. There are top experts abroad, I'll help you get in touch with them right away. No need, I cut him off. I know my own body best. I didn't come here today for treatment. I pulled out the documents my assistant had just sent me from my bag, a thick stack containing all the information on Evren, Margot, and Isara. Photos, videos, bank transfer records, everything was there. I pushed them toward him. Take a look at this first. Leander looked utterly confused but still picked up the documents and began reading carefully. His expression shifted from confusion to shock, then to anger, until he finally slammed his hand on the table so hard that coffee splashed out. Those bastards. Delilah, look at what you've sacrificed for the company and this family. How dare Evren do this? He had watched me struggle every step of the way and knew exactly how hard it had been for me. I shook my head, signaling for him to calm down. There's no point in talking about that now. Leander, I called you here because I want to draft a will. Leander's expression instantly turned serious. Delilah. Let me finish, I said, looking at him, my words firm and deliberate. All my shares, properties, cash, and every asset under my name, after my death, they will be placed into a trust fund. The sole beneficiary of the fund will be my grandson or granddaughter. Leander was completely stunned, his mouth hanging open as he struggled to speak. Grandson? Granddaughter? Delilah, are you saying? I nodded. Yes. For the first clause of the will, make it clear for me, only the children of my biological son, Cashin, are eligible to inherit all of my estate. Whether legitimate or illegitimate, as long as a DNA test confirms they are Cashin's biological offspring, he or she will be the sole heir. Leander was completely stunned, his eyes filled with disbelief. But Delilah, Cashin isn't even married yet. And he trailed off, knowing about my son. Cashin, my only son, is 25 years old. Unlike Evren, he is my pride and joy. He is intelligent, independent, and has his own ideas. After graduating from university, he didn't join my company but instead pursued his passion for art, establishing his own studio abroad. He also knows that my son doesn't like women. Leander. I interrupted him, my tone calm yet carrying an undeniable firmness. You don't need to worry about whether he's married or anything else. Just write it as I've instructed. Leander looked at me. Having known me for 20 years, he understood that once I made a decision, no one could change it. He remained silent for a long time before finally nodding. All right, I understand, Delilah. It was as if he had suddenly grasped something profound. The look in his eyes shifted from shock to complete admiration, even tinged with a hint of secret excitement, like a gambler about to participate in a high-stakes game of the century. And one more thing, I continued. You will be the executor of the will. After my death, until my heir turns 25, the trust fund will be managed by you and your team. Each year, you may take 5% of the fund's appreciation as a management fee. Leander gasped in astonishment. My current net worth is nearly 100 billion, so the scale of this fund is unimaginable. A 5% management fee is an astronomical figure. This is the reward I'm giving him, but it's also the shackles I'm placing on him. He must give his all to protect this family fortune. Delilah, this is too much. It's not too much, I said, looking at him with a sharp gaze. I want you to guarantee that, before my son and grandson receive the money, no one can touch a single cent of it. Especially Evren and his illegitimate daughter. I deliberately emphasized the words illegitimate daughter. Leander's eyes sharpened as he adjusted his glasses. I understand. Delilah, rest assured, as long as I have breath in me, no one will be able to exploit any loopholes. I laughed, I believe you. Next, I went over some details, such as how the company's equity would smoothly transition after my death and how to prevent Evren from seizing power in the process. We talked for the entire afternoon, and every single point was arranged clearly and flawlessly. When I walked out of the cafe, it was already dark. I looked up at the city's neon lights, and the heavy weight in my heart finally lifted. Evren, Margot, Isara. You want my money? Sure, maybe in the next life. When I returned home, Evren was anxiously waiting for me in the living room. Seeing me, he immediately rushed over. Where have you been? Why didn't you answer your phone? I was worried sick. I looked at him and said calmly, I went to see a few friends. He leaned in and sniffed the scent on me. You've been drinking? Didn't the doctor tell you to rest properly? The same old excuse again. I was a bit tired and didn't want to keep up the act with him anymore. I pushed him away. I'm tired, I want to sleep. I walked straight upstairs, and he followed behind me. Delilah, let's talk. What's really going on with you? Ever since you came back from the hospital, you haven't been yourself. I stopped in my tracks, turned to look at him, and said word by word, "What do you think I should do? Happily tell you that I'm about to die?" My voice wasn't loud, but in the empty stairwell, it sounded exceptionally clear. Evren froze, the color instantly draining from his face, his lips trembling. What did you say?" I said. I looked into his eyes, without a trace of emotion. "I have cancer, terminal. At most, I have 6 months left." His body swayed, and he grabbed the stair railing to keep from falling. Tears welled up in his eyes instantly. "No, it can't be, how could this?" He shuffled toward me step by step, wanting to embrace me, but I took a step back and avoided him. His hand hung awkwardly in midair. Looking at the grief on his face and the tears streaming down, I suddenly found it all utterly ridiculous. Was he grieving for me? Or was he mourning the pause button that had just been pressed on the wealth and luxury he was about to obtain? Perhaps he was already calculating in his mind that once I died, he could rightfully bring Margot and Isara into this house. My billions in assets would all be his, theirs. He choked up. "Delilah, don't be afraid. I'll take you abroad to find the best doctors. We can definitely cure you. I can't live without you." He spoke so sincerely that I almost believed him. I looked at him and said softly, "All right." Chapter 3. In the days that followed, Evren truly became the model husband everyone praised. He turned down all unnecessary social engagements, came home on time every day, learned to cook various nutritious soups, and went out of his way to make me happy. He even sold the villa in the suburbs and used the money to buy me a globally limited edition sports car, saying that the house had bad feng shui and made him uneasy, so it was better to exchange it for something I liked. He placed the car keys in my hand. "Delilah, once you're better, I'll take you on a road trip around the world." I looked at him, sneering inwardly. What a great actor. All he sold was a house. The love for his family of 3 remained completely intact. My assistant told me that Margot and Isara had moved into a more upscale apartment in the city center, with a monthly rent of $300,000, paid for by Evren, of course. Isara also switched to a new, more expensive international school, and Evren visited them more frequently, though he was more discreet about it. He probably thought I was too sick to know anything. Every day, he played the role of the devoted partner in front of me, showering me with care and attention. Sometimes, when I watch his busy figure, I get the illusion that we are still that couple who shared both joys and sorrows. But as soon as I think of that family photo, of that girl named Isara, all that remains in my heart is a cold, bitter hatred. My health is deteriorating day by day. The side effects of chemotherapy are severe. I've started losing hair in clumps, I vomit whatever I eat, and I've become so thin that I'm almost unrecognizable. Most of the time, I can only lie in bed. Evren hired the best caregivers, yet he still prefers to do things himself, feeding me, wiping me down. The more he does this, the more disgusted I feel. This afternoon, I was feeling unusually better and sat in a chair by the window to bask in the sun. Evren walked in, holding a tablet with an ingratiating smile on his face. "Delilah, look." On the tablet was the company's third-quarter financial report, showing a 20% increase in profits. Our new project has been exceptionally well received in the market, and the stock price keeps rising. Just focus on recovering, I've got the company under control. His tone carried a hint of pride, as if all of this were his own achievement. I looked at those numbers, all of it earned with my life, negotiated project by project, decided decision by decision. He, Evren, was merely reaping the rewards. And now, he wanted to claim it all as his own. I handed the tablet back to him, my voice weak. "You've worked hard." He took my hand. "Between husband and wife, there's no need to talk about hard work. What's yours is mine, and what's mine is yours." He said it so naturally, so matter-of-factly. I looked at him and suddenly felt like teasing him. "Evren, when I die, I'll leave the company entirely to you." Evren's eyes instantly lit up. It was an uncontrollable surge of wild joy, though it lasted only a second, so fleeting it was almost impossible to catch, but I still saw it. He quickly put on a sorrowful expression. "What nonsense. Don't say such things. What use would the company be to me without you? I smiled, I mean it. When I'm gone, Cashin has no interest in business. Who else would I leave this family and this company to, if not you? I stared at him intently, and he grew somewhat uncomfortable under my gaze, avoiding my eyes. Don't think too much about it. You'll get better. I have only one request, I said. What is it? He immediately pressed. Be good to Cashin, I said, looking at him. He's my only son. Don't let him suffer. As I said this, I thought to myself, Evren, you probably don't know yet, but your precious illegitimate daughter Isara, her good days are almost over. When I mentioned Cashin, his expression grew complicated, there was guilt, but even more so, relief. He quickly nodded. Don't worry. Cashin is my son too, I'll definitely treat him well. Once he comes around, he can return to the company anytime. This position was always meant for him. His words sounded sweeter than a song. Over the years, I've seen clearly all the obstacles he's thrown in Cashin's way, both openly and secretly. He'd be thrilled if Cashin never came back, never competed with him for the family fortune. I couldn't be bothered to expose him, so I closed my eyes and said, I'm tired. Evren helped me lie down, tucked me in, and kissed my forehead. Get some good rest. I'll take care of everything. I could tell he was in an exceptionally good mood today, his steps were noticeably lighter. After he left the room, I opened my eyes and stared at the ceiling, silently counting down in my heart. Evren, your sweet dream is about to end. Time flew by, and in the blink of an eye, 2 months had passed. My body had reached its limit. The doctor said my organs were beginning to fail, it was only a matter of days now. I called Leander to my bedside, with Evren also present. In front of him, I signed a new equity transfer agreement, transferring 10% of the shares under my name to Evren. When he saw the agreement, his eyes widened, and he trembled with excitement. Delilah, you're... I smiled weakly, you've been working so hard for the company and for me lately. This is what you deserve. 10% of the shares, with a market value of nearly 10 billion, and I could see the greed and ecstasy in his eyes. He hypocritically declined, no, this is too valuable. I can't accept it. Leander said coldly beside him, Evren, this is Delilah's heartfelt gesture, just accept it. Evren then reluctantly accepted it, holding my hand as tears fell again. Delilah, thank you. Don't worry, I will definitely not let you down. I looked at him and thought to myself, Evren, this is just a bit of interest. The real feast is still to come, and you'd better be ready to take it. After signing the agreement, I sent Evren out, saying I wanted to talk to Leander alone. Only the two of us remained in the room. Leander looked at me with a complicated expression in his eyes. Delilah, why go to such lengths? He didn't understand why I would still give Evren any advantage. I smiled. Leander, if you want to destroy someone, you must first make them lose their mind. The more he gains, the harder he'll fall when the time comes. Leander was stunned for a moment, then understood what I meant. He looked at me and bowed deeply. Delilah, I've learned from you. I waved my hand dismissively. Have all the final arrangements been made? He nodded, everything is settled. The will has been notarized, absolutely foolproof. You can rest assured. Finally, I was completely at peace. I gazed at the sunset outside the window, which had dyed half the sky red, so beautiful. I murmured to myself, Cashin, my son. My final consciousness lingered here. 3 days later, I passed away at the age of 48. Chapter 4. My funeral was a grand affair, entirely arranged by Evren. It was held at the city's most prestigious funeral home, and the mourners included nearly all the prominent figures in the city, business tycoons, political officials, celebrities, and stars, coming and going in an endless stream. Evren was dressed in a sharp black suit, his face etched with just the right amount of grief and exhaustion. He had lost some weight, with dark circles under his eyes, looking every bit the heartbroken husband mourning his deceased wife. He greeted each guest, shaking hands, embracing them, and accepting their condolences with sincere and flawless words. Anyone who didn't know better would truly be moved by this display of deep affection. I watched him, catching a glimpse through the crowd as he exchanged a knowing glance with a familiar colleague, a fleeting smile flashing at the corner of his mouth. I knew what he was thinking. This funeral, for me, was an end; for him, it was his coronation. He was declaring to everyone that from today onward, he, Evren, was the sole master of the group. My son Cashin rushed back from abroad. He stood before my black and white portrait for a long time, looking even thinner than the last time I saw him, with the familiar coldness and stubbornness in his eyes. He didn't cry, just stood there quietly, staring at me without blinking, as if trying to etch my image into his bones. I know he is deeply saddened. We spent little time together as mother and son. I was too busy with my career and owed him too much, but we understood each other better than anyone else. Evren walked over and placed a hand on Cashin's shoulder. Cashin, don't be too sad. Your mother wouldn't want to see you like this from heaven. His voice was filled with the concern of a loving father. Cashin's shoulders stiffened slightly. He turned his head away, avoiding Evren's touch. He looked at Evren, his gaze icy. You don't seem the least bit surprised by my mother's death. The sorrow on Evren's face froze for a moment before he quickly masked it. What nonsense are you talking? How could I not be sad? My heart is broken. Your mother was my whole world, and now, that world has collapsed. He began his performance once again. Cashin didn't speak further, just watched him coldly, with a look as if he were watching a clown. Evren, feeling uneasy under his gaze, patted his back. You must be tired. Go rest in the lounge for a while. I'll handle things here. Cashin turned and walked away without a hint of hesitation. He made his way to the corner where Leander was waiting for him. The two exchanged a glance, and Leander gave him a slight nod. Cashin's expression softened slightly. He knew I had arranged everything. He knew my final counterattack was about to begin. After the funeral ended and the guests dispersed, Evren finally removed his heavy mask. He sat alone in the empty morning hall, gazing at my portrait, his face now unable to conceal his smugness and satisfaction. He lit a cigarette for himself, took a deep drag, and then smiled. Delilah, don't worry, I'll take good care of the company for you, and I'll look after Cashin too. And, we'll all live well. He took out his phone and sent a message to Margot, it's all over. Get ready, I'll bring you home in a few days. He thought he had won. He thought that from now on, the world would be his. How pitiful. He didn't even realize that what he was standing on wasn't a broad, smooth road at all, but a volcano on the verge of erupting. Chapter 5. Less than a month after my death, Evren brought Margot and Isara home, to the villa that had consumed half my life's efforts. I watched his car slowly pull into the courtyard. He stepped out himself to open the door for Margot, a gentle smile on his face as if welcoming a queen. Margot wore a simple dress, yet the smugness in her eyes was impossible to hide. She clung to Evren's arm as she stepped out of the car, her gaze greedily sweeping over the mansion. Every tree, every brick here bore my name, and she seemed to think it would soon be theirs. Isara followed behind them, dressed in a designer miniskirt and wearing flawless makeup, her expression full of impatience and disdain. Dad, is this the big house you were talking about? It doesn't look all that great. The decor is so outdated, it's like something from decades ago. Evren dotingly tapped her nose. You silly girl, if you don't like it, we can redecorate. We'll tear everything down and do it in the style you prefer, okay? Isara finally smiled, that's more like it. She skipped into the living room like a princess surveying her territory, touching this antique vase and kicking that Persian rug. All this stuff is so old, let's just throw it away. She plopped down on my favorite sofa and crossed her legs, saying, Dad, I don't care, I want the biggest room, the one upstairs facing south with the balcony. That used to be my master bedroom. Margot hypocritically tugged at her. Isara, don't be silly, we're here to pay respects to Aunt Delilah. While she spoke of paying respects, Her eyes were busy estimating how much the painting on the wall was worth. Evren smiled. It's fine, from now on this will be our home. Isara can choose whichever room she likes and stay there. He was still speaking when a cold voice came from the stairs. Who allowed you to come in? It was Cashin. Dressed in black loungewear, he stood on the stairs, looking down at them with eyes as sharp as knives. The laughter in the living room abruptly ceased. Evren looked somewhat awkward. Cashin, why are you home? This is Aunt Margot and her daughter Isara. They came to pay respects to your mother. Cashin slowly descended the stairs, not looking at Evren, his gaze fixed directly on Margot and Isara. Pay respects? My mother's memorial tablet is in the ancestral hall. This is my home, and you are not welcome here. His voice wasn't loud, but every word fell like ice cubes hitting the ground. Isara was startled by his imposing presence, but quickly snapped back to her senses. She stood up, hands on her hips, and said, Who do you think you are? My dad said this will be our home from now on. You're just an outsider. Margot tugged at her daughter's sleeve, signaling her to watch her words, but Isara paid no attention. She pointed at Cashin and declared, Let me tell you, I'm my dad's daughter too. I have inheritance rights. This house, half of it belongs to me. Cashin looked at her and suddenly laughed, his smile filled with mockery and disdain. Inheritance rights? You? He walked up to Isara, his height giving him an absolute sense of oppression, and said word by word, First, my mother's body is not yet cold, and you couldn't wait to step into this house, utterly shameless. Second, everything here belongs to my mother's premarital assets and the fruits of her personal efforts. It has nothing to do with your father or you, not a single penny. Third, before I call security to throw you out, get lost. Isara was so frightened that she took a step back, her face turning pale. Evren finally couldn't stand it any longer and stepped in front of Isara, shouting angrily at Cashin, Cashin! How dare you speak to your sister like that? She is your sister. You share the same blood. Cashin looked at the furious Evren, his eyes filled only with disappointment and sorrow. She is not my sister. My mother only gave birth to me. As for you, from today onward, you are no longer my father either. After speaking, he took out his phone and dialed a number. Security? There are 3 outsiders in the living room. Please escort them out. Evren trembled with anger. You, how dare you? Margot also panicked, pulling on Evren's arm. Evren, we should leave for now. She didn't want to escalate the situation before getting the money. But Isara was unwilling, screaming, I'm not leaving. This is my home. Soon, 4 tall security guards rushed in, bowing respectfully to Cashin. Young master. Cashin pointed at the 3 of them. Please escort them out. The security guards immediately stepped forward. Evren wanted to resist, but seeing those burly men, he ultimately didn't dare move. He could only watch helplessly as he and his new family were dragged out of the villa's main entrance like trash. Isara's cries and curses could be heard clearly even through the door. Cashin, just you wait. My dad won't let you off. Once the will is read, let's see how arrogant you can still be. Cashin stood before the massive floor-to-ceiling window, watching their disheveled figures outside the door, his expression unreadable. He took out his phone and sent a message to Leander. We can begin. Chapter 6. Being driven out of his own home by his biological son, Evren felt this was the greatest humiliation of his life. But he quickly brushed aside this displeasure, as Leander's call came through, notifying him that in 3 days, he was to go to the law firm to read the will he had drawn up before his death. After hanging up the phone, Evren could no longer hide the smile at the corner of his mouth. He knew the final moment had arrived. Once the will was announced, he, Evren, would become the rightful heir to the group. By then, not only would this villa be his, but even that little bastard Cashin would have to obediently follow his orders. He comforted Margot and Isara, who were still sobbing. All right, stop crying. Why get angry over a brat? Once Dad gets his hands on the inheritance, we can buy whatever house we want. We'll buy an estate 10 times bigger than this one. Isara finally stopped crying, her eyes red as she asked, "Dad, will that old woman's will really leave all the money to you? What if she gave a portion to Cashin too?" Evren sneered coldly, "How dare she? Before she died, I had already figured out her thoughts. She valued the company more than her own life. Who else could she trust besides me? As for Cashin, that useless thing, does he even understand what it means to manage a company? Before your mother passed away, she specifically transferred 10% of the shares to me, just to reassure me." He grew more and more confident as he spoke, as if he could already see the billions in family wealth beckoning to him. Suddenly remembering something, he took a document from his briefcase and handed it to Isara. "Keep this safe." Isara took it and looked. It was a DNA paternity test report, clearly stating that Evren and Isara shared a biological parent-child relationship. "Dad, what is this?" Evren smiled smugly. "This is the final safeguard. Even if your mother's will doesn't mention you, according to the law, as my daughter, you still have the right to inherit. When the time comes, we, father and daughter, will join forces to take over the entire group." Margot listened on the side, overjoyed, as if she could already see her future as a billionaire's wife. She said gently to Evren, "Evren, you've really suffered all these years." Evren hugged her. "It's all in the past now. From now on, only good days lie ahead." The family of three was immersed in the dream of becoming suddenly wealthy, completely unaware that a net tailor-made for them was already quietly tightening. 3 days passed in the blink of an eye. On the day of the will reading, Evren arrived in full regalia with Margot and Isara. He wore a custom-made, hand-tailored suit, looking triumphant and spirited. Margot was adorned with my former diamond necklace. Isara was decked out from head to toe in designer brands. The three of them looked as though they were attending a grand awards ceremony. They entered Leander's office, where Cashin was already waiting in the spacious conference room. He was still dressed in his usual black attire, sitting quietly with an expressionless face. When Evren and the others walked in, he merely lifted his eyelids slightly. Evren strode directly to the head of the table, intending to take a seat, but Leander's assistant reached out to stop him. "Sir, please take a seat over there," the assistant said, gesturing toward the guest seats nearby. Evren's face darkened for a moment, but he held back his anger, thinking to himself, "Just wait until the will is read. Let's see if you still dare to treat me like this." He took Margot and Isara and sat down opposite Cashin. The atmosphere in the conference room was tense. Besides them, there were several senior board members of the company, all of whom were my most trusted subordinates during my lifetime. They looked at Evren and his family with a hint of disdain in their eyes. Leander walked in, holding a sealed manila file folder in his hand. Everyone's eyes were fixed on that folder, which contained a future worth hundreds of billions. Leander cleared his throat and said, "Everyone, I have gathered you here today at the request of my client, the late Ms. Delilah, to read her final will." He opened the file folder and took out the documents inside. Evren straightened his back, while Isara's face showed undisguised excitement and greed. Margot nervously clenched her fists. Only Cashin remained calm. He even took out his phone and glanced at the time, as if completely indifferent to what was to come. Leander adjusted his glasses, his gaze sweeping over each person's face before finally settling on Evren's. He looked at him, a meaningful smile curling at the corner of his mouth, and then began to read aloud, "First clause of the will." Chapter 7. Leander's voice echoed in the quiet conference room, clear and cold. "First clause of the will, I, Delilah, hereby bequeath the 51% stake in the group held in my name, all real estate under my ownership, including but not limited to properties and land, as well as all cash, deposits, securities, funds, trusts, collectibles, and other personal assets, to be placed, upon my death, into an irrevocable designated heir trust fund." Hearing this, a triumphant smile had already appeared on Evren's face. He even glanced smugly at Cashin, thinking, "Who else could be the beneficiary of this fund besides me?" Margot and Isara were so excited that their faces flushed red, as if they could already see countless banknotes flying toward them. Only a few of the company's senior directors furrowed their brows, feeling that things weren't that simple. They had experienced my methods before and knew I would never make such a straightforward and simple arrangement. Cashin remained expressionless, even spinning his pen with a hint of boredom. Leander paused, took a sip of water, and his sharp gaze swept over Evren's smug face. Then, he read out the most crucial sentence in the will. The sole legal beneficiary of this trust fund is the biological child of my biological son, Cashin. That is to say, my grandson or granddaughter. The conference room fell into a deathly silence. Evren's smile froze on his face, like a wax statue that had instantly solidified. The color drained from his face at a visible rate, turning ashen. What did you say? He couldn't believe his ears, suspecting that Leander had misread it. Isara was the first to scream, "That's impossible." What about me? What about my dad? Why should it go to his son? His son doesn't even have a girlfriend. Margot also panicked, grabbing Evren's arm. Evren, what's going on? Is the will fake? Evren suddenly stood up, slamming his hand on the conference table. Leander. What do you mean by this? This will is forged. Before Delilah died, she personally transferred 10% of the shares to me. That's enough to prove her trust in me. How could she possibly have made such an absurd will? He seemed to have gone mad, pointing at Cashin, and him. What kind of person is he? Everyone knows. It's impossible for him to have any offspring. This clause simply cannot be fulfilled. It's illegal. Invalid. Facing Evren's outburst, Leander just calmly adjusted his glasses and turned the will document toward Evren. Evren, please take a closer look. This will was personally recorded by me while Delilah was in a completely sound state of mind, and it was signed by President Jiang herself, with her fingerprint affixed. The entire process was recorded with audio and video, and 3 days ago, it underwent the highest level of notarization by the city notary office. The 10% of shares in your possession are Delilah's gift to you for your 20 years of marriage. As for the assets in this will, they are Delilah's inheritance to her own bloodline. The two do not conflict. Every word from Leander felt like a heavy hammer, striking Evren's heart with force. A gift? An inheritance? He understood now, that venomous woman. She was toying with him. She used those 10 billion in shares to stabilize him, to lull him into a false sense of security, making him believe he had victory in his grasp. Then, with this damned will, she delivered the most fatal blow. Evren trembled with rage, pointing at Leander. You conspired with her. I'll sue you. I'll sue you for forging the will and embezzling the assets. Leander smiled, a smile filled with disdain and pity. Sue us? Evren, I suggest you worry about yourself first. He pulled another document from the folder and gently placed it on the table. This is another set of materials Delilah entrusted me to compile before her death. It contains all the evidence about you transferring marital assets, keeping a mistress, and supporting an illegitimate child during your marriage. This includes, but is not limited to, bank transfer records, property purchase contracts, and all the expenses you paid for Margot and her daughter. The total amount is as high as 97.8 million yuan. Delilah's intention was that this money would be considered a loan to you. Now that she is no longer here, as the executor of her estate, I have the right to demand repayment of this debt from you, including both principal and interest. The 10% stake you hold is worth approximately 10 billion yuan in market value. I believe that should be more than enough to settle this debt. With a thunderous crash, Evren felt as if his mind had exploded. He staggered back 2 steps and collapsed into a chair, his face as pale as a sheet of paper. Chapter 8. It's over, everything is over. Evren slumped in his chair, his mind completely blank. He never imagined that my scheme could be so deep, so ruthless. Not only did I shatter his hopes of inheriting the estate, but I even used this method to take back every last bit of sweetness he had managed to get his hands on. I'm going to make him leave with nothing, utterly destitute. Seeing Evren's devastated state, Margot was completely panicked and shrieked, "Impossible. This is extortion. That money was given to us willingly by Evren. Why should we have to return it?" Isara, like an enraged little beast, rushed to the conference table and pointed at Leander and Cashin. "You're all liars. You're ganging up to bully us. My dad worked his heart out for the company for 20 years, why should he get nothing?" And, suddenly remembering something, she pulled a document from her designer bag and slammed it down. It was the DNA test report. "Look clearly. This is the paternity test between me and my dad. I'm his daughter too. I also have the right to inherit. This will of yours discriminates against women, discriminates against children born out of wedlock. I'm going to sue you." Her words actually reminded Evren. Yes. That clause in the will itself had a huge loophole. Evren, as if grasping at the last straw, suddenly stood up, pointing at Cashin with a sinister smile on his face. "Leander, don't forget. For a clause in the will to be valid, it must be executable. This clause, Cashin's biological child, is fundamentally a false premise." He turned to the board members present, his voice dripping with malice. "Some of you here may not know this yet, but my dear son here, he doesn't like women. He will never marry, let alone have children. Delilah set up this impossible condition precisely to keep the inheritance locked away in the trust forever, so no one can touch it. A will that harms others without benefiting anyone has no legal validity." After finishing, he looked triumphantly at Leander, convinced that he had finally found the fatal flaw in this will. However, Leander's expression remained calm, even more pitying than before. He looked at Evren as if watching a clown struggling in its death throes. "Evren, who told you that Mr. Cashin has no children?" This statement struck everyone in the conference room like a bolt from the blue. Evren froze. What nonsense are you talking?" Several board members whispered among themselves, their faces filled with shock. Only Cashin slowly put down his pen, looked up, and curled his lips into a cold smile. Leander unhurriedly took out 2 more documents from his briefcase, which seemed to hold countless secrets. One was a birth certificate, and the other was a DNA report with translation and embassy certification. He projected the documents clearly onto the screen in the conference room using a projector. Everyone's gaze shifted to it. "This is little Emil," Leander's voice echoed clearly in everyone's ears. "He was born abroad 3 months ago. His mother is a foreign surrogate mother. And his biological father." Leander's hand pointed to the final conclusion of the DNA report. After comparison by the most authoritative genetic testing institution, little Emil's DNA matches Cashin's DNA with a 99.9999% accuracy. According to relevant laws, he is Cashin's only biological son with legal inheritance rights. At the same time, he is also the sole designated heir in Ms. Delilah's will. On the screen was a photo of a baby, a tiny infant sleeping soundly, with features that bore a striking resemblance to Cashin and to my younger self. Leander continued, "After learning she had a terminal illness, Delilah initiated this plan. From finding a suitable surrogacy agency to the smooth birth of the child and the completion of all legal documents, Delilah was personally involved and oversaw every step. It can be said that this child is the final and most perfect masterpiece Delilah left for herself and for this world. Little Emil is currently being cared for abroad by a professional childcare team, and when the time is right, Cashin will bring him back to the country. So, Evren." Leander turned his head and looked at Evren, who was completely stunned. "The premise you mentioned, that the will's provisions cannot be executed, never existed from the very beginning." The meeting room fell into a dead silence, so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Evren stood with his mouth agape, his eyes wide as saucers. He looked at the photo on the screen, then at Cashin's indifferent expression, and finally realized that this was not a hasty act of revenge, it was a meticulously designed, flawless checkmate from start to finish. "Delilah. You're so cruel. You're truly so cruel." His legs gave way, unable to support him any longer, and he collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. Chapter 9. Evren fainted, his spirit completely shattered by these successive fatal blows. Margot and Isara screamed and rushed forward, pinching his philtrum and calling for an ambulance. The entire meeting room descended into chaos. Leander waved his hand, and his assistant along with 2 security guards immediately stepped forward to escort the disheveled family of 3 out. As Isara was dragged away, she continued to curse resentfully, "Cashin! You and your dead mother, may you both die a horrible death." Cashin didn't even bother to lift an eyelid, he never cared about the howls of the defeated. The meeting room finally returned to silence. The directors present looked at Cashin, their expressions completely transformed, from initial sympathy and concern to shock, awe, and even fear. They finally understood that my son had perfectly inherited everything from me, his restraint, his composure, and that ruthless cunning capable of crushing enemies into dust. The most senior director stood up, bowed slightly to Cashin, and said, "Young master, no, President." He had already changed his form of address. "Since the will has taken effect, we will certainly abide by your mother's wishes and do everything in our power to assist you in safeguarding the company." The other directors also voiced their support. "Well said, we will all follow President Cashin's lead. With you at the helm, we have nothing to worry about." They were all shrewd individuals, aware that from today onward, the leadership of the group had changed. Though this young man before them was only 25, the wisdom and depth he displayed far exceeded his years. Moreover, behind him stood the old fox Leander and the flawless, terrifying plan I had left behind, enough to strike fear into anyone. Cashin stood up, without the arrogance of a young man who had achieved success early, his expression still calm. He spoke calmly to the several directors. "Uncles, you overpraise me. I am not skilled in the management and operation of the company. In the future, the company will still rely on the collective decisions of the board of directors, and I will not interfere excessively. I have only one task." He paused, his gaze sweeping over everyone present, "to protect the legacy my mother left behind until the day my son can take it over with his own hands." His words were neither humble nor arrogant, yet carried an undeniable force, both reassuring the senior members and making his own bottom line clear. The directors looked at him, their eyes filled with admiration. "Delilah, you have a worthy successor." The meeting ended, and the directors gradually left. Leander walked over to Cashin and handed him a glass of water. "It's all over." Cashin took the water and took a sip. "No, it's only just begun." He looked out the window. Downstairs, where an ambulance was flashing its lights and hurrying away, Evren was being carried inside. "He still has the 10% of shares Mom gave him. With his personality, he won't let this go easily." Leander smiled. "Your mother saw it coming long ago. Among the documents she left me, there's also a gift specifically prepared for him. It contains evidence of how he used his position over the years to secure improper benefits for himself and his friends and family. While it might not be enough to send him to prison, it's more than enough to ensure he'll never be able to hold his head high in the boardroom again. If he dares to stir up trouble with that 10% of shares, this gift will find its way onto the disciplinary committee's desk." A faint smile finally appeared at the corner of Cashin's mouth. "Mom, she always thought of everything." Yes, that version of me, even in her final moments, had paved every road and cleared every obstacle for him. Leander patted his shoulder. "So, what's next?" Cashin set down the water glass, a flicker of tenderness in his eyes. "I'm going to pick up my son and go home." He took out his phone, and on the screen was a photo of his son, that little one named Emil, the most precious legacy I left for him. Looking at the photo, he silently said in his heart, "Mom, don't worry. From now on, I'll live well, carrying your hopes. Your empire has me. Our home has me too." The sunlight outside the window filtered through the glass, casting a warm and bright glow inside. My era had come to an end, while Cashin's was just beginning. Chapter 10. Evren woke up in the hospital's intensive care unit, an oxygen tube in his nose and an 4 needle in the back of his hand. The stark white ceiling stung his eyes. Margot and Isara were by his bedside, their eyes red and swollen. Seeing him awake, Margot rushed over, her voice choked with tears. "Evren, you're finally awake. You scared me to death." Evren pushed her away, propped himself up, and yanked out the oxygen tube. His eyes were bloodshot, like a trapped beast, as he muttered incoherently, "The will, that old fox. Cashin." Everything that had happened in the conference room flooded back into his mind like a tide: humiliation, shock, anger, despair, all these emotions instantly overwhelmed him. He slammed his fist against the bedrail with a loud clang. "Delilah! How cruel you are!" he roared, his voice hoarse. He had struggled for 20 years, endured humiliation and hardship for 2 decades, believing he was the ultimate winner. Little did he know that from beginning to end, he was merely a pawn on my chessboard, manipulated at my whim, and in the end, discarded like worthless trash. Isara shrank back in fear, sobbing softly, "Dad, what do we do now? That Cashin has frozen all our cards. We haven't paid this month's rent for the apartment we're living in, and the landlord is already pressing us." A single penny can bring a hero to his knees, let alone them, who were never heroes to begin with. They were vines clinging to Evren, and now that the great tree of Evren has fallen, their days of comfort have come to an end. Margot grew anxious too, grabbing Evren's arm. "Evren, think of something quickly. We can't just let this go. Don't you still have 10% of the company's shares? That's a huge sum of money." "Yes. The shares." Evren seemed to suddenly remember something, a glimmer of hope reigniting in his eyes. 10% of the shares, though just a drop in the bucket compared to the entire 100 billion empire, still amounted to nearly 10 billion in assets, enough for him to make a comeback. "That's right, I still have the shares." He struggled to get out of bed. "Get me my phone. I need to contact my lawyer. I want to call a board meeting. I'm the company's second largest shareholder. I refuse to believe I can't outmaneuver some greenhorn kid." A hint of madness flashed across his face as he felt he still had a chance to turn things around. As long as he made good use of the shares in his hands, rallied support within the board, and stirred up trouble, he could make life miserable for that kid Cashin, maybe even drag him down from that position. Margot and Isara, seeing him regain his composure, breathed a sigh of relief and quickly handed him the phone. Evren took the phone and immediately started making calls, reaching out to several directors he usually got along well with. However, the responses from the other end of the line were surprisingly consistent, dismissive, cold, and evasive. "Evren, your health is what matters most. Don't worry about the company's affairs for now." "The board meeting?" "Oh, there's nothing major going on lately. I don't think it's necessary to hold one. Evren, I have another meeting to attend. Let's talk later." 1, 2, 3. Everyone seemed to avoid him like the plague. Evren's heart sank bit by bit. He finally understood that when the tree falls, the monkeys scatter. He was no longer the vice president standing above all but one. Now, he was just a stray dog kicked out by its master. Just as he was feeling utterly disheartened, the door to the hospital room was gently pushed open. Leander walked in, his face still wearing that unruffled expression. Behind him followed 2 bodyguards, carrying a fruit basket. He placed the basket on the bedside table and said, "Evren, I heard you were sick. I'm here on behalf of Cashin to see you." His tone was polite, yet filled with a sense of condescension. Evren saw him, the hatred in his eyes almost blazing with fire. "What are you doing here? To laugh at me? Get out. I don't want to see you." Leander paid no mind to his anger, pulled out a chair, and sat down on his own. "Evren, don't be so furious, it's not good for your health. I know you must be feeling resentful right now, thinking you still have 10% of the shares, that you still have the capital to compete with me and Cashin." He leisurely took another document from his briefcase and gently placed it on Evren's blanket. "I advise you to take a look at this before making any decisions." Evren picked up the document suspiciously, opened it, and with just one glance, his pupils suddenly contracted. Chapter 11. The contents recorded in that document were not complicated, but each item was enough to make Evren break out in a cold sweat. They were copies of contracts through which he had funneled benefits to the decoration company owned by Margot's brother, taking advantage of his position as the company's procurement manager over the years. They were bank transaction records showing how he sold a highly promising company project to his college classmates' company at a price far below market value, pocketing huge kickbacks in the process. They were payroll records of several incompetent relatives he had placed in the company to collect salaries without doing any work, all by exploiting his authority. Each and every incident was clearly documented, with solid evidence. He had carried out these deeds with extreme secrecy, believing they were flawless. He never imagined that my woman had long since uncovered every detail of his actions. I never moved against him, not because I was unaware, but because I was waiting for the perfect moment to play this final trump card, to nail him firmly to the pillar of disgrace once and for all. Evren's hands began to tremble, and the documents slipped from his shaking grasp, scattering all over the floor. He stared at Leander, his lips quivering, unable to utter a single word. Leander bent down, picked up a contract, and gently blew the dust off it. "Evren, if these were handed over to the Commercial Crime Bureau, where do you think you'd spend the rest of your life?" His voice was soft, but to Evren, it sounded like thunder. Evren collapsed onto the bed, gasping for breath in ragged, heavy heaves. He finally understood, he had lost, utterly and completely, without a shred of dignity left. From the moment I decided to fight back, he never stood a chance. His so-called shares, his so-called counterattack, all turned into a joke in the face of this ironclad evidence. Margot and Isara were also stunned. They had no idea that Evren had been doing so much behind the scenes. Margot rushed to the bedside, grabbing Evren's hand. "Evren, is this true?" Evren closed his eyes, his face ashen. Leander stood up, straightening his suit. "Delilah made it clear before she passed away. She said that, after all, you were once husband and wife, and she didn't want to be too harsh. She could let these matters go, and you could keep that 10% of the shares. Isara could live comfortably as a wealthy person, waiting for dividends every year." He walked to the door, paused, and looked back at Evren. "But on one condition, you must behave. If you insist on using your shares to do things you shouldn't or say things you shouldn't, then this document will appear wherever it needs to, at any time. The choice is yours, Evren. Think it over." With that, Leander turned and left with his bodyguards. The hospital room fell into a deathly silence. Isara suddenly burst into tears, grabbing Evren's arm and shaking it desperately. "Dad. Say something. What on earth is going on? What are we going to do now? Have we lost everything?" Margot was also at a loss, only able to cry along. "Evren, think of something." Evren suddenly opened his eyes, pushing the two people off him. His eyes were filled with disgust and hatred. "It's all your fault," he roared at Margot and her daughter. "If it weren't for having to support you two burdens, how would I have gotten involved in all this? How would I have ended up in this state today? It's all your fault." He blamed all his failures and resentments on this mother and daughter. Margot was stunned. She couldn't believe that the man who had once been gentle and caring, promising her a lifetime together, would say such things. Isara even jumped up. "What are you saying? You had an affair and gave birth to me, that was your own choice. Now you're shifting all the blame onto us? Are you even a man? If you weren't so useless, unable to stand up to your wife, would we have been kicked out? You're pathetic." A heart-wrenching argument erupted in the hospital room. The once seemingly warm family of three revealed their ugliest, most true selves under immense pressure and self-interest. They accused and cursed each other, hurling all their shame and disgrace right in each other's faces. Looking at them, I suddenly felt that this was much more interesting than sending Evren to prison. Let him live, let him guard that massive, untouchable fortune in shares, let him and this mother-daughter pair he was so proud of as his true love torment and drain each other in poverty and suspicion. This, perhaps, is the cruelest punishment for him, for them. Evren, your good days are still ahead. Enjoy them slowly. Chapter 12. A month later, on the azure coast of France, in a white villa overlooking the entire Bay of Angels, Cashin met his son, Emile, for the first time. The little one had just woken up, lying in his crib, opening a pair of big, dark grape-like eyes, curiously observing this unfamiliar world. He was growing fast, his little face chubby, his eyes and brows strikingly similar to mine. Cashin stood by the bedside, looking at him, this little one who had suddenly appeared in his life, the heaviest yet sweetest responsibility I had left him with. His emotions were complex, a mix of the nervousness and uncertainty of first-time fatherhood, along with the wondrous feeling of a blood connection. The head of the childcare team, a kind French woman, walked over and smiled, saying, "Sir, would you like to hold him?" Cashin nodded somewhat stiffly, extending his arms and clumsily lifting the tiny, soft body into his embrace. Little Emile seemed to sense his father's nervousness. Instead of crying, he opened his toothless mouth and gave Cashin a little smile. In that moment, Cashin felt his heart melt. He held his son and walked to the rocking chair on the terrace to sit down. The warm sunlight spilled over the father and son, while the sea breeze gently blew past, carrying a salty scent. Cashin looked at the little one in his arms and spoke softly, as if talking to him, yet also to himself, "Emile. I am your father. You have a grandmother, her name is Delilah. She is an incredible, remarkable woman. She built a vast empire for you, for me. She loved you very much, though she never got the chance to see you in person." At this point, Cashin's eyes grew slightly moist. He looked up toward the boundless blue sky, as if he could see me smiling down at them from the clouds. He took a deep breath and continued, "From now on, Dad will be with you as you grow up. I will teach you to be brave, strong, and full of wisdom, just like her. When you grow up, Dad will hand that empire over to you, completely and intact. It is the greatest gift she left for us." The little Emile in his arms seemed to understand. He reached out his tiny hand and grasped one of Cashin's fingers, holding it tightly, like a promise, or perhaps a gesture of reliance. Cashin smiled, a genuine, relaxed, and warm smile. All the pent-up emotions, the sorrow, the hatred that had weighed on him over this time, vanished in that moment. He knew that his revenge had come to an end. But his new life was just beginning. He would protect his inheritance, and even more importantly, he would safeguard the most precious hope he had left behind. Back in the country, after Evren was discharged from the hospital, he sold the sports car that had been gifted to him, rented a small apartment, and squeezed in with Margot and her daughter. With no source of income, Evren had to hustle for daily necessities. The shares he held would yield a substantial annual dividend, but that money wouldn't be paid out until the beginning of the following year. Until then, he had to learn how to live like an ordinary person. Margot also set aside her lavish lifestyle and began learning to buy groceries and cook for herself. Isara was even withdrawn from the elite private school and transferred to an ordinary public high school. The family of three argued about money every day, and the affection they once shared had long been worn away by harsh reality. Occasionally, Evren would catch news about the Jiang Group in financial reports. He saw Cashin swiftly implementing internal reforms, rooting out all the parasites he had left behind. He also saw the company's stock price soaring to new highs in his absence. Whenever this happened, he would lock himself in his room and drink himself into a stupor. His life had become a joke. And I, Delilah, my story should also come to an end. I gaze into the distance, at my son, my grandson, bathed in sunlight, and at my enemies, sinking and struggling in the hell I personally crafted for them. Finally, I can leave in peace. Goodbye, world that I once loved and once hated. My legend ends here. And their future is boundless. Chapter 13. The first month the Evren family moved into their new apartment was the most satisfying month I witnessed after my death. It was a two-bedroom apartment of less than 80 square meters in the old city district, with yellowed walls and outdated furniture. The living room window faced the wall of another building, leaving it perpetually deprived of sunlight. This formed the sharpest and most laughable contrast to everything they had once possessed. Margot could no longer sleep in and then head to a high-end beauty salon for treatments. She had to wake up before dawn every day to rush to the market and compete with elderly shoppers for discounted vegetables. Upon returning, she faced piles of laundry that never seemed to end and a floor that could never be cleaned thoroughly enough. Her once delicate hands, which had only ever worn diamond rings, had now become rough and reddened from prolonged soaking in water mixed with cheap dishwashing liquid. Isara's life was even harder. Once the princess who was the center of attention at an international school, she now stood out as an oddity in the public high school where all the students wore identical uniforms, drawing sidelong glances from everyone. She couldn't break her habit of being picky and arrogant, complaining about the cafeteria food being unpalatable and mocking her classmates' unfashionable clothing. Soon, she found herself isolated, with no one willing to speak to her. After class, she would always sit alone in the corner of the classroom. The humiliation of falling from grace nearly drove her mad. As for Evren, his daily routine revolved around drinking. He locked himself in that cramped, stifling secondary bedroom, downing bottle after bottle of the cheapest liquor. He didn't dare go outside or face people, afraid of seeing looks of pity or contempt in their eyes. The family's meager savings were quickly depleted by the three of them through reckless spending and constant arguments. One day, while preparing a meal, Margot discovered that there was no food left in the house. Her face turned ashen as she stormed into Evren's room, snatched the bottle from his hand, and smashed it violently on the floor. "Drink! Drink! Drink! That's all you know how to do. Look at what's become of this family. We don't even have food anymore. And you're still drinking." Evren raised his bloodshot eyes and glared at her. "Why are you yelling at me? If it weren't for you, would I have been so thoroughly outsmarted by that woman Delilah?" He had started his usual routine of shifting blame. Margot trembled with rage. "Evren, do you even have a conscience? I've been with you for 18 years, without any status, and I gave birth to your daughter. And in the end, you blame everything on me? Who was it that swore they would definitely get the inheritance and give Isara and me the best life? And now? You're just a worthless good-for-nothing." The words good-for-nothing cut deep into Evren's pride. He suddenly stood up and grabbed Margot by the hair. "Say that again. I'm telling you, even if I'm down and out now, it's not your place as a woman to lecture me." Two people were fighting in that cramped room. Isara rushed out of her own room, saw the scene, and screamed as she tried to pull them apart. The situation descended into chaos, crying, cursing, and the sound of things shattering all mingled together. This was what I once believed to be true love, fragile and ugly in the face of money and reality. In the end, the farce concluded with Margot crying out, "We have no money left. We can't go on living like this." Evren, exhausted from the fight and somewhat calmer, gasped for breath. Suddenly, he thought of something and looked at Margot. "What about that necklace around your neck, and all those bags and jewelry of yours? Can't they still be sold for money?" All of those were things he had bought with my money in the past to win her favor. Margot froze, instinctively covering her neck. "No. Don't even think about it. Those are my things." Evren sneered. "Your things? Which one of them wasn't bought with my money? Now that the family can't even afford to eat, you still want to cling to those trinkets? I'm telling you, take them and sell them tomorrow. Otherwise, all three of us will starve to death." Margot looked at him, her eyes filled with unfamiliarity and fear. She finally understood that this man had never loved her. What he loved was the feeling of controlling her and bestowing favors upon her. When he lost everything, he wouldn't hesitate to squeeze the last bit of value from her. Margot cried, her sobs tearing at her heart. I watched her, but my heart remained unmoved. If she had known it would come to this, why did she act that way in the first place? All of this was nothing but the retribution she deserved. Chapter 14. In the end, Margot gave in. Tearfully, she picked out a few of the most inconspicuous pieces from her treasured collection and took them to the pawnshop to exchange for some money. That sum of money eased the family's immediate crisis, but it also felt like a thorn, deeply embedded in the hearts of all three of them. Evren began to take it for granted, treating Margot's jewelry and designer bags as the family's ATM. If there was no money for alcohol today, he would make her pawn a bracelet. If Isara needed to pay for tutoring fees tomorrow, he would have her sell a bag. Margot went from resisting at first to growing numb until finally, only silent resentment remained. She looked at her empty jewelry box, then at the man who was drunk all day long, and began to regret it. She regretted why she had ever believed that man's lies and given up her own life. As for Evren, he too grew increasingly twisted by the immense disparity. He began calling Leander frequently, asking when the dividends from the shares that belonged to him would be paid out. Each time, Leander would tell him in a businesslike tone, "Evren, according to the company's bylaws, annual dividends are calculated and distributed after the financial report for the first quarter of the following year is released. Please be patient." Be patient, these words were the cruelest curse to Evren now. He was like a gambler hanging off a cliff, his only hope being a rope that seemed within reach yet remained impossibly distant. He began trying to find a job. With his past experience, he thought landing a corporate executive position shouldn't be a problem. But reality delivered one resounding slap after another to his face. Those headhunters and HR professionals who once bowed and scraped, flattering and fawning over him, now immediately put on a face of avoidance at the mere mention of his name. "Evren? Oh, I'm sorry, we've already filled that position. Evren, our company is too small, I'm afraid we can't accommodate someone of your stature. Everyone knows how he was kicked out of the group by my son, and they also know he holds a pile of shady, unsavory secrets. No company dares to hire a celebrity with a tarnished reputation, who could bring trouble at any moment." After hitting walls repeatedly, Evren gave up completely. He blamed all his failures on Cashin and Leander's behind-the-scenes suppression. Every day, he cursed us at home, cursed the unfairness of the world, and then drowned himself in alcohol to numb the pain. From a once respectable business elite, he completely degenerated into a resentful drunkard. The atmosphere at home grew increasingly oppressive. Isara's situation at school did not improve. During a midterm exam, her grades ranked at the bottom of the class. The teacher called Margot to the school and tactfully explained that Isara's foundation was too weak, and she couldn't keep up with the lessons at all. Moreover, her relationships with classmates were tense, and she had been involved in several arguments. The teacher suggested that she see a psychologist. Upon hearing this, Margot felt her face burning with shame. She recalled Isara's glory days at the international school, the praise and flattery she had received from teachers back then. The stark contrast between then and now felt like a knife twisting in her heart. When she returned home, she vented all her anger on Isara. "Do you have any ambition at all? I worked so hard to support your education, and this is the kind of grade you show me? How could I have given birth to such a useless child?" She twisted the teacher's words, turning them into the most vicious insults aimed at her daughter. Isara also exploded, screaming as she slammed her backpack hard onto the ground, "What right do you have to criticize me? If it weren't for your uselessness, would I have been forced into this lousy school? Here, everyone looks down on me. Everyone bullies me. I hate you. I hate you to death." The mother and daughter argued fiercely, turning the house upside down. Evren came out of his room and yelled impatiently, "What's all this noise about? Can't you let anyone sleep?" Then, with a loud bang, he slammed the door shut again. He had completely lost patience with this family, with this mother and daughter. The only thing he cared about now was his dividend, the lifeline that could free him from all of this. Days passed one after another in this desperate waiting and endless quarrels. Winter arrived, and the apartment had no heating, leaving it cold and damp. Evren huddled under the blanket, staring at the calendar as the days drew closer to the next quarter. In his eyes, a sickly fervor flickered. Soon, very soon. The first thing he would do after getting the money was to leave this place, to leave these two women who only brought him trouble. He wanted to start over, to make everyone who had looked down on him regret it. I watched him immersed in the beautiful dream he had woven for himself, and suddenly felt a little pity. Because he had no idea that the final big gift I had prepared for him was also about to arrive. That gift would completely shatter all his illusions. Chapter 15. As the New Year's bell rang, the group's annual financial report was released as scheduled. Under Cashin's leadership, the company's profits had reached a new high last year, far exceeding market expectations, and the stock price had soared along with it. The entire business world was praising my young son, saying he had surpassed his predecessor. Every day, Evren kept a close watch on the financial news, and as he saw the positive reports about the group, his spirits soared along with them. The higher the company's profits, the greater his dividends would be. He had already started calculating that, based on his 10% stake, this round of dividends would bring him at least several $100 million. With that money, he could completely turn his life around, move into the best neighborhoods, buy the most expensive sports cars, and re-enter high society. He even began browsing online for luxury mansions and yachts, as if the money was already tucked away in his pocket. Margot and Isara also sensed the change in his mood, and the atmosphere at home eased up a bit for once. Evren even, for the first time ever, gave them some money to buy new clothes. All three of them were immersed in the fantasy that their hardships were finally coming to an end. Finally, amidst the eager anticipation of many, the letter from Leander and Associates arrived at their dilapidated apartment. It was an extremely ordinary-looking manila envelope, but to Evren, it felt as heavy as 1,000 pounds. With trembling hands, he tore open the envelope, while Margot and Isara nervously leaned in, holding their breath. Inside was a dividend notification letter, detailing the company's total profits, the dividend amount per share, and, as a shareholder, the final after-tax dividend he was entitled to receive. Evren skipped directly to the last column. When he saw the number clearly, the smile on his face instantly froze. 120,000? He thought he must have misread it, rubbed his eyes hard, and looked again. No mistake, the number was clearly written, 1,200,000 exactly. How is that possible? Isara was the first to scream. Weren't we told there were several hundred million? How could it be just over a million? Margot was also stunned. Evren, is there a mistake? Did you forget to add a few zeros? Evren stared fixedly at the notice, his gaze falling on the remarks clause below. Remarks, according to the resolution of the company's board of directors, to promote the company's long-term development, 90% of this year's distributable profits will be reserved as capital for the research and development of new projects and market expansion. The remaining 10% of the profits will be used for shareholder dividends. With a loud crash, Evren felt as if his world had collapsed once again. He understood, this was another one of Cashin's schemes. This resolution must have been orchestrated by Cashin. In this way, Cashin had pulled the rug out from under him, extinguishing his last glimmer of hope. And it was all executed flawlessly, fully in compliance with corporate law and the company's bylaws. Even if he wanted to sue, he couldn't find any grounds. Pfft, a mouthful of blood suddenly sprayed from Evren's lips. His vision went dark, and he fell backward, stiff as a board. Dad! Evren! The apartment once again echoed with terrified screams. Evren was once again admitted to the hospital, this time due to a stroke. Although he was saved, he was left with severe aftereffects, half of his body lost sensation, his speech became slurred, and he was completely incapacitated, a paralyzed man in need of constant care. The 1.2 million in dividends was quickly exhausted on his expensive medical and rehabilitation expenses. Looking at Evren lying in the hospital bed, with a twisted mouth and slanted eyes, unable to even take care of his own bodily functions, the last trace of affection in Margot's eyes was completely extinguished. She made a decision. Late one night, she packed up the last of her remaining belongings, took Isara, who was still somewhat reluctant, and quietly left the hospital. Time flies, and 18 years have passed. Emil has grown into a tall and upright young man, now 18 years old, with clear and handsome features, possessing both Cashin's steadiness and my own decisiveness. He grew up following Cashin around the company, and through constant exposure, he developed a keen sense and talent for business that surpassed his age. By 16, he was already involved in company decision-making, and several of the proposals he put forward brought significant gains to the company, making him a widely talked-about prodigy in the business world. For the 50th anniversary celebration of the group, Cashin chose the seaside villa I once loved most as the venue. He had it renovated into the Delilah Art Center, which is open to the public free of charge. It houses art treasures from around the world, as well as the culmination of my life's work, and has become a cultural landmark of the city. On the night of the celebration, under a starry sky, business elites gathered together. Cashin stood on the podium and announced an important decision: he would step down as chairman of the group, and Emil would take over. The audience was in an uproar, yet it made perfect sense. Cashin looked at Emil beside him, his eyes filled with pride. The group is my mother's life's work. I've guarded it for 10 years, and now, it's time to hand it over to Emil. He is more capable than I am and better suited to lead the group into the future. Emil stepped forward, took the microphone, and looked firmly at the audience below. I will carry on my grandmother's will, protect the group, innovate within it, and make the name Delilah an even more dazzling legend. As his words fell, thunderous applause erupted. After the celebration, Cashin completely set aside the company's affairs and focused on managing the Art Foundation. He finally lived the life he had always wanted, free, composed, no longer bound by hatred or responsibility. After Emil took over the group, he lived up to expectations, leading the company to expand into overseas markets and transforming the group into an internationally renowned enterprise, truly fulfilling the promise he made back then. The Delilah Art Center by the Sea is always bustling with people. Some come to appreciate art, while others come to learn about my history and that of the group, to understand the legendary woman Delilah who built everything from scratch. As for me, I have become the sea breeze, the stars in the sky, the fragrance of gardenias, watching over my son, my grandson, and everything I built over a lifetime. I have witnessed the ugliness of human nature, tasted the bitterness of betrayal, faced life and death trials, and been consumed by hatred, but in the end, I ultimately emerged victorious. I won by safeguarding my life's work, by ensuring the bloodline continues, and by ensuring those who betrayed me received their just punishment. More importantly, my love, my will, my spirit have never vanished. They live on in Cashin and Emil, they grow in every inch of the group's land, and they will forever shine through time. There is no longer a Delilah in this world, but my legend will never end. And those past darkness and disgrace are ultimately just a speck of dust in the river of time, scattered by the wind, never to be remembered again.